Hello, and welcome to our latest NeuGroup Insights interview. I'm Joseph Neu, founder and CEO of NeuGroup, and I'm joined today by Scott Bilter, who's co-founder and CFO of Atlas Risk Advisory, a technology platform that identifies and mitigates FX risk, also known as AtlasFX. Prior to AtlasFX, Scott spent about a dozen years in senior treasury and FP&A roles at HP, which has a tremendous reputation for treasury and finance professionals, by the way. And he joins me from San Francisco. Scott, welcome.
Thanks, Joseph. Appreciate the chance to chat today.
Yeah, so we mentioned the role that HP has potentially played in Atlas FX. Maybe elaborate a bit on that and give us a bit of color on the Atlas FX backstory.
Sure. Yeah. So myself and the other two co-founders of Atlas, John O'Tunney and Gavin O'Donoghue. So we all started our FX careers at HP. I won't say necessarily when, a little ways ago. And we were at the time running everything on an army of spreadsheets, which we see, some folks still struggle with today. And you can get away with that if you're a small company for a while, but at some point you certainly outgrow that. And we definitely did at HP. We had one in particular that we referred to as the FX Beast that consolidated the balance sheet forecasts and all the trades, suggested trades monthly. It was an unruly beast, and it had the inevitable spreadsheet error. And in our case, it was fortunate that it was actually something that led to a large gain, but that was kind of a wake-up call that we needed to change both the process and the technology that we were using for FX risk. So that really, I guess, was sort of an old beta version of what we developed at HP. Then when we left at different times, Gavin had been in Pfizer in Ireland and been pitched by a competitor of ours and was confused about what they were charging for something that did a subset of what we had built back at HP. So that was what really kind of spurred the decision to maybe take this to market. So I guess that is really how Atlas was born.
Yeah, I'm always fascinated in companies that develop, particularly large enterprises that develop software. What does this say about application development and investment in bespoke tech tools by enterprises? To you, coming out of the experience launching Atlas FX from HP.
Yeah, no, I think there's a huge advantage to that and having that domain expertise and feeling the pain. So when we decided to do this, of course, we left HP with what we refer to as the beta version, but then it's tough to maintain that type of thing in house. And I think the SaaS model, no one needs really convincing at this point of how important and how much that makes sense for a lot of companies. So they realized that maintaining that in-house was tough. Getting IT to keep up with changing needs is tough. So they're thankfully a client of ours today, have been for years. So that's worked out very well. And I think our background, especially back in the day, HP was really a giant tech holding company. Even had some businesses beyond tech. So we had a very complex environment, multiple foreign exchange strategies. So we knew from the beginning, even just managing HP's needs, that there is no one size fits all approach to FX risk management. There's always corner cases you're going to need to figure out. You have to have the flexibility. And just importantly, we knew the pain points. So sort of like, got to touch that hot stove to know to not do it again. And so we set out to build something that addressed those pain points that we were very well aware of. And I think that intersection of that technology and domain expertise is very key. Because if you just, we've seen other offerings where if someone tries to build something in anticipation of all the corner cases, there's no way you can get all that. Every company's different. You have to have the flexibility to adapt to someone else's needs. So that was really important for us.
It's very interesting that you're both in Treasury and FP&A, and that's something that we at NeuGroup are very interested in at the moment, and that is the collaboration between Treasury and FP&A, including on FX management. How does Atlas FX help with that? And are there use cases beyond FP&A that Atlas FX serves well, particularly on the analytics side, perhaps?
Yeah, no, great question. And that is a challenge. There's a number of reasons, I guess, why FP&A and Treasury are often kind of ships passing in the night with different types of needs or different processes, different timelines. FP&A may be, looking at things by quarter and by region, and Treasury needs stuff by month and by currency. But I think one of the bigger problems is that every company will have an annual budgeting or planning process, and then that bridging the gap between that and what's usually the best case of a layered hedging approach on the cash flow side is something that a lot of companies have difficulty dealing with. First of all, they may not even choose the right rate for that planning cycle. If they just stick a line in the ground and say today's spot rate, we should use that. But if you already have hedges that go into the next year, that's not the best way to go. And certainly if they're going to go and survey banks about which direction they think these currencies are going over the year, just please don't do that. Even if you're not a customer, just call me and I'll talk you out of doing that. Don't do that. So there's a lot of things that can go wrong there. But even so, once you have a plan, and no one wants to redo the entire annual plan as things change and rates change through the year, but it's important to bridge the gap between what's actually happening and tying it back to that plan. If those are the metrics, or if it's trumped by something that changes over the year, great. But we can bridge that gap to multiple rates, multiple plans that really are key to getting the company to understand just not just Treasury, not just FP&A, but any person that's getting allocated gains and losses in the company, understand how that drives their metrics. And you can get in a lot of trouble if you don't do that. Someone may have a massive FX tailwind and easily make their numbers. Someone may have a headwind and almost impossible to make their numbers. If they don't understand, how things go back to initial strategy, or where the volume drivers or rate drivers are explaining the deltas, it's really tough to have a good conversation around that. So that's really we try to bridge that gap, with FP&A and beyond in the company.
Can you talk to me a little bit about how the use case for AtlasFX is driven by the fact, for example, that ERPs tend to be designed more with an accounting bias and set up in that regard, and don't necessarily cater as well to FX or broader exposure management. How can AtlasFX help in that regard?
Yeah, I think, and just the truth is, the broadest audience for the ERP data are not really concerned with the FX details. Most want to see, if it's a U.S. company, they want to see everything in U.S. terms, already converted in the reporting currency. So I think that's the reason why so many out-of-the-box reports are not going to have that detail, and it's that transaction currency detail that's really needed, where the transaction currency differs from the functional currency. That's what's going to drive an FX impact that needs to be hedged. So the few people that really care about that are not really being served by the reporting from the ERP. So it's important to be able to get that transactional currency detail, but not only get it out, but sort of play it back in a digestible way. So if some folks just extract it, you may end up with millions of lines of data that could overwhelm an Excel, and you don't know what to do with it. So really we go beyond that, and it's important to not just get it, but you have to cleanse it, you have to validate it. We know what problems often appear on it, whether it's ghost balances from something cleared out in the reporting currency or the functional currency, but not the transaction currency. Lots of issues that if you don't understand the data, you're not going to really be able to do that. So we want to help our customers, be able to interrogate that data and make it talk, and slice and dice it, aggregate it, drill down every way that's needed to really manage FX risk. And it's not even just ERP data that we need to be in the middle of. There's lots of intersections of data for foreign exchange. You could have forecasts coming in from spreadsheets or some other FP&A tool. You could have information in the TMS for the trades, or a trading platform, or other source systems or subledgers. So it's just really important for us to be a complete FX visibility platform, and be able to solve that problem, because the ERP out of the box certainly does not do that.
So Scott, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you, given the current environment that we're in, coming out of COVID, we've got a major shift in the rate environment, inflation. We've got a conflict with Russia and Ukraine that's pretty significant, and and it's introduced a lot of volatility in financial markets, but certainly including foreign exchange. Can you give a few examples of where having visibility control of FX data is valuable to corporate treasury in an environment like we're in today?
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe just kind of shifting on the balance sheet side. So talking about FP&A, I was more on the cash flow, but on the balance sheet side, that often is immediately impacted by some of these interest rate changes, some of the 4-point costs that we're seeing, and being able to drill down and see all the sources of variance on the balance sheet results is really important. Given that our customers can kind of see that difference between remeasurement and your hedging gain losses, and there's always going to be some delta, but quickly seeing, where's that, what's the breakdown between the 4 points, the spot trading slippage, forecast deviation, is the remeasurement making sense? All those items of being able to drill down and see the culprits is really important these days, especially where 4 points may get pretty expensive. You're seeing some movement off of historical lows in interest rates at different paces from different countries, and that's really going to cause a lot of volatility. And being able to understand that, not just from a budgeting point of view, to understand what sort of the cost of doing business is, but where you can maybe mitigate that, find some natural hedges or some opportunities to naturally hedge on your balance sheet. If you can have a local currency IC loan to offset a long position here and there, or make sure that you're not giving too long payment terms in a high interest rate currency, because the customers will definitely want to do that. Or if the sales folks haven't been talked into giving what is essentially an embedded option, if you can pay in a different currency, that's quite expensive in this environment. You want to make sure that that is the type of thing that Treasury is engaging with the businesses, and just kind of going from being just frantic data managers and just swamped in a manual process, to actually understanding and seeing the data and really becoming kind of FX data masters. So that's what we really strive to do, to be entire FX visibility platform, so they can have those discussions and that engagement with the entire business.
No, I can really see, coming from a sea of spreadsheets, how having a tool like this really frees up a lot more time to think about the data and move further into actually analyzing it. But Scott, thank you so much for joining us, and look forward to talking again soon.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. I mean, so many of our customers are in your peer groups, and they are always looking forward to those meetings, and we hear great things coming back from that. So really, really happy to talk with you today.